Jack Mitchell, episode number 5 of the Groin Kick Chronicles, and now we go on into the top 30, and we have really started entering the pain cave with today's episode.
Yes, we'll get to it eventually, but one of these games in particular, I was shocked, a bit appalled, was on this list, and it brought the pain for me personally. I mean, they all did. Yes. They all have for this one. But yes, obviously, going the way that we are, these are getting increasingly painful. By the end of this podcast series, I'm going to be in the fetal position listening or doing the entire thing with you.
All right, well, we'll see if we can get the microphone put on the floor for you as we roll on. Let's go through 30 through 21 before we dive into these games individually. Number 30, the COVID loss to Northwestern in 2020. Number 29, last season's loss to Indiana. Number 28, 2019 loss in West Lafayette to Purdue. Number 27, another blowout loss. That was the Michigan game in 2018. Speaking of blowout losses, a couple more for you. Number 26, 2017 to Iowa. Number 25, the 2016 Ohio State debacle. Number 24, the 2021 Michigan game. I think I figured out which one that you're going to most disagree with. Number 23, the 2024 USC game, which kind of gave us the Chronicles. Thank you. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Number 22, last season's loss to Illinois. And number 21, the final game of the Scott Frost era, the Georgia Southern defeat in 2022. We're going to go in order moving forward on these episodes. So let's go all the way back to the COVID loss to Northwestern in 2020. This is a game where, I mean, really an ugly game, Jack, is kind of how I remember this one the most.
This is a combination of two factors for me, I think, that probably mitigate how painful, at least in retrospect, they are for me. Number one, we've talked about this before. The COVID year was weird. I think of it as an asterisk. You know, there was pain at the time, but there was always, as I've talked about before, just this sort of, hey, they're playing, right? That's good. And then you combine that with the Northwestern games. So this is odd. What I found in doing this is the Northwestern games in particular, and look, I have been famous for some of my comments about Northwestern and their coaches and their brand.
Yes.
But I'm telling you what, all of the Northwestern groin kick losses bleed together for me.
Interesting.
I have got a little bit of a hard time. There's no opponent where I can have a harder time picking out. They all kind of seem a little bit the same, right? And so I think you bring both of those together for this one. For me, this one probably would have been ranked lower, as in a higher number on the list.
Yeah, if we were to do a mini series just on the Northwestern losses, even though this is a one-score loss, I don't think that it I mean, we're going to get to one in a couple episodes that is really, really bad, but even before the groin kick era, the first loss that they had to Northwestern of the Big Ten era back in 2011, I think way harder to deal with than this one.
That was one where they ran it down Nebraska's throat.
Correct.
All in.
Correct.
That's the thing. And I've loved how you've done the memorable or unmemorable play for each one, because right before you say it every time, I flash in my head, because for me, I've got one quintessential memory of a play or something that happened that game. I always try and see if the first thing I think of is the same thing that you came up with on those. For most of the Northwestern games, I'm telling you, Josh, like, I don't have individual plays or moments. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's about just the way those games went. And there's some other games where I feel that way, that there's just not one quintessential moment. Some of the other ones we have on here, there aren't. Some there definitely are as well. And we've talked about that. And you've had a few in the previous episodes where you just haven't even picked one, right? Because there really isn't one.
Yeah, for sure.
I kind of think in order for it to, I feel like you kind of need to have that to enhance the rating.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about this? The only reason that this game is even into the top 30 is because the total yards disparity, Nebraska dominates in that category. And so that gave us a perfect 10 out of 10. But otherwise, I mean, it's an 8-point loss, so it's a one-score loss, losing 21-13. But, you know, I would say, Jack, and we can move on into 2024 Indiana, this Northwestern loss at number 30, I would say is one of the last unmemorable losses, if you will, that has kind of climbed this high, which is a rare, I mean, now I think we're going to start getting into games that are insanely memorable, always for horrible reasons. I mean, this whole project is for, horrible reasons. But this is one of the ones that, as I got higher and higher, maybe the least memorable, least forgettable, easiest to forget for me.
This was the second game of the year, right?
Correct.
After the Ohio State game?
After the game had gotten canceled versus Wisconsin because of COVID.
That's right.
Yes.
Right.
So it was already a weird start. It was already November, and they only played one football game.
Yeah. Man, yeah. I thought that it feels like that was a dream.
Yeah.
It's just so odd.
That whole season was really stupid. Let's get to it. Last season's loss, the 2024 loss to Indiana. Nebraska enters this game 5-1 on the year, 1 win away from bowl eligibility, coming off of a weird couple of weeks, right? They'd lost to Illinois, which we'll talk about later on in this episode. They'd gotten some wins over Purdue and over Rutgers. They weren't looking really good. And remember the mindset going into this game. How good is Indiana football? Mm-hmm. Well, we found out that they were pretty good, and Nebraska played their most uninspired game of the entire Matt Rule era. Can we say that at this moment in time?
Probably. And this is one of those, sometimes we've had some blowout games already. We've got a few more to come.
Yes.
And sometimes I have a hard time reconciling them being too high in our rankings just because I feel like sort of a quintessential characteristic of the Groin Kick era is a late game issue that happens. And so I sometimes struggle. Of the blowouts, to me, this one is one of the more groin kicky, I would say. I think it's because you went into it kind of thinking, okay, Indiana, potential paper tiger here with this whole thing. Nebraska is about to turn the corner. Matt Rule, year 2, right?
Yeah.
They've got Dylan Raiola now, and so you're going to start to see that. We might not have realized how many health issues Dylan Raiola was having at the time, and the absolute butt kicking. I mean, from beginning to end was more painful than some of the Ohio State blowouts, right? Or the Iowa blowout at the end of the Mike Riley era, that kind of a thing.
I think that's a really good point because, in a couple of games, we're going to get to 3 blowouts in a row. And so as we move into the top 30, there were only 4 blowouts left. Every other game that we will talk about besides these 4 blowouts on this episode, starting with 2024 Indiana, are all 1-score losses.
So, real quick, I know you've already gone over what are the 4 blowouts, just so people can think about like what they think the worst was.
So it's 2024 Indiana, it's 2018 Michigan, it's the 2017 Iowa game that you just mentioned, and the 62-3 loss to Ohio State. So those are the 4 games that were able to climb into the top 30, because you're right. I'm with you. When I think of the Groin Kick era, I think of the 1-score losses. And that's how, when we put together our formula, we wanted to make sure that those types of games were represented the best. But we had a couple of categories that were able to shoot some of these games to the top. If you lost by 43 or more points, that game was going to get rated a little bit higher on our scale, where we're talking about a 56-7 loss to Indiana right now. If the yardage disparity was so poor, well, that game is going to bump up. And ultimately, if the max second half win probability or if the overall win probability was so low, and we're talking about games that are in the 1% or lower range, which those games were, then that game was going to shoot to the top. I personally, I think that the rankings for these 4, I think, is pretty good.
You think so?
I think the
top...
of
course you do.
That's true. Thank you for reminding me that I helped put together the math. But I think the 62-3 loss, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, is ultimately the worst. But this one, you're right, man. There was something about this game and the way in which Nebraska lost this game to Indiana where I went in thinking that they were going to be pretty good. I think you were definitely less bullish than I was.
I was skeptical.
I still think you thought that they were a solid team. So for them to run Nebraska off the field, especially when later in the same month they lose to Ohio State by just a few points, there's something about this game where maybe it's why it's into the top 30. It's because it's Indiana.
The other way I would distinguish between the blowouts is that if they're at the beginning or the end of a coaching career.
Yes. And this is year 2.
Yeah. The beginning, if we're still on the uphill or we're way on the downhill, as in the 2017 Iowa game, as we'll talk about here in a bit.
Yep. Before that, though, we have another 1-score loss for Nebraska, 2019 Purdue. Now, I had a chance to talk to, obviously, a variety of people about this project. And, Jack, I would say of all of the non-Iowa losses, and let's even throw in Michigan State in 2021, some Wisconsin ones, this game, almost more than any other game, continues to come up in dialogue that I have with friends, with fellow media members. This one has stuck in people's craw for close to 6 years now, a 31-27 loss in West
100%. I thought it would be top 15, borderline top 10.
Seriously.
Honestly, I did. And you talk about the quintessential moments, and you talked about those already. But for me, right away, I think of getting the ball on a turnover way inside of the red zone, not being able to convert. And then I remember the Ronnie Bell trick play, whatever it was. and just losing on that kind of a play.
Yeah.
And those are the two that pop out to me right away in this game.
Yeah, the audience just heard it in the first half of the podcast. Nebraska was in their territory, I mean, pretty much every drive, for the first half plus of the football game. And they're trailing even after all that success. That was one of those games. 2019 is unfolding, and it's been really frustrating. I would say, though, this was peak frustration for, I think, a lot of people, where it's just, how in the world are you playing how are you playing so well and getting good field position, but playing so poorly and being unable to finish drives?
This is among the quintessential, if not the top. They should have won that game based on the way that they played, maybe on this whole group.
Yeah, it seriously is. It was a really gross loss. I mean, just top to bottom with the inability to finish. And I remember, Mike Stibbs has been helping us out with this project. I remember him saying something during that game, and I think he had the same mindset a lot of other people did, and that's like, is it time to bench Adrian Martinez? Like, I think this is when the Adrian discourse, the Adrian dialogue really started reaching wow, he's just not the guy that we thought he would be in his second year at Nebraska.
I know a part of the feature that we're going to be doing on this with some extras is people telling stories of their individual memories of these. Yeah. I haven't talked about many of them, but this one I remember. I watched the first half, and for the second half, my daughter had an elementary school volleyball game. And so I was listening to it with my son. Both had earbuds in, right? And it was 2019, so they were probably corded earbuds then. Bluetooth had not been invented yet then.
Classically.
And yeah, that was invented in 2023. And so I remember we were sitting there in the middle school gym, the volleyball game, just listening. And at the end, as you talked about, up, down, up, down. There were score after score. It was kind of trading blows for a while.
Yeah, it's funny. After they're unable to finish so many drives in the early part of the game, then it's there's just tit for tat, and ultimately Purdue's able to get the victory. So that is number 28, the 2019 loss to Purdue. So let's get now to these last three blowouts. We start with the 2018 Michigan game. Scott Frost, first season, they're 0-2 going into this one. Of course, the close loss to Colorado, the close loss to Troy, and at this moment in time, Michigan had lost to Notre Dame in week 1, and I remember thinking Nebraska's going to lose. I think it's going to be close. We were wondering, how is Adrian going to play given the injury that he suffered? This was his first game back. And, I mean, Jack, talk about listless. I mean, This was, they call it rock bottom after this game. I remember the takeaway from me from a lot of the writers and fans was, well, it's Mike Riley's fault after this loss. This was insanely dispiriting because it's one thing to start 0-2. It was another thing to go to 0-3 and show, they just don't belong on the field versus a team like Michigan.
Right, and this was another of maybe a subgenre of games where Nebraska's first offensive drive, and I don't even remember exactly what happened, but there was a little hope or almost a big play, I believe.
They're moving the ball a little bit down the field.
They're moving the ball a little bit, and things looked some fool's gold at the beginning. Go back to 2022 Oklahoma, same way, right? Mm-hmm. There's a few like that, and then after that first drive, nothing, it's over, and they got blown out. There was a lot of foreshadowing in this game, too, of what was to come a little bit. I remember the first time I heard Scott Frost talk about the guys on the sidelines doing the jump up and down thing during the kickoff.
That's right,
I think he said that in either the post-game or the Monday press conference after this game. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the first time I had heard him say anything like that. And we've already talked about, the hoodie, right? And some of those other things that were kind of like that. And so there's just a little bit of some of the foreshadowing of and the rock bottom comments like you referenced.
Yeah, it was just one of those games where you could really check out fairly quickly. Speaking of games, though, that you could not check out fairly quickly, number 26 on the list, the 2017 Iowa game, the final loss of the Mike Riley era, the final game of the Mike Riley era. And what's so interesting about this game, Jack, is that Nebraska has a lead towards the end of the first half. They're playing some really good football. And remember, this is the most gorgeous afternoon for a football game, especially on a Black Friday.
It was like 70-some degrees. I was at the game.
Yeah, it was incredible. This was a late afternoon kickoff. And, of course, all of the conversation is it's going to be Scott Frost. Are we going to find out that Mike Riley's fired on this Friday? Are we going to find out that he's fired on the Saturday? It would end up being the day after. Do you remember at the same time, UCF is playing South Florida.
We watched it on the bus. We took the bus from Holmes Lake out there, and my son and I had it on our phone watching the Central Florida game, cheering Central Florida on after that game, just putting the Iowa game behind us, and cheering on Scott Frost.
And so Nebraska, going back to this game, they're playing really, really well. And I remember and I think you and I had even some debates about it in October and November, there was this push and pull with the fan base of wanting Nebraska to maybe lose so then it would be easier and a cleaner cut, right, with firing Mike Riley. By this point, I think everyone knew what was going to happen. And so I thought that it kind of gave people a freedom to like, hey, cheer for Nebraska. Mm-hmm. You don't have anything to worry about. They're playing well, and then they score. Iowa does at the end of the first half. And the second half is just a bloodbath, including, 2 Noah Fant touchdowns in this game, and they run away 56-14.
Yeah, something happened in that game, and the team moved on.
Yeah, seriously.
I mean, I don't know when it was exactly that their spirit was broke, but once that happened, it was moving on to the next thing.
You think
is what it looked like.
Is that a fair spot, do you think, for this game being all the way up at 26? Or was it, given how we were checked out emotionally?
Given that we were checked out, I would have thought it might have been lower, just because, again, it wasn't sort of, there was hope in the first half, and it was Iowa, which I think helps. And I remember feeling pretty sick about the whole thing, but it was kind of a bigger term kind of sickness. I remember tweeting something that didn't make the cut for the tweet of the game for this one, but tweeting something like, I'm just going to sit here till the end of the game and soak in the Iowa fans around me, just the celebration, because it's going to end.
Yeah.
Because we won't have to feel this again.
Yeah.
And that's going to make that moment even better. And I've probably said that several times.
Probably a few
throughout
times.
This whole thing, where my idea is, if I absorb all the pain, it's going to make the joy even more intense. And it will be eventually, I think.
You've been joy edging for so many years.
Yes. Maybe it's 2025 and you're going to finally have that, joy explosion.
Well, let's all hope so. By the way, 0.43 post-game win probability for Nebraska. So, I mean, it was just, which is interesting given that it was kind of a game at the end of the first half. And finally, Jack, let's get to the last blowout on the list. This is going to be at number 25. So after this, every game will be a one-score loss in the top 24. 62-3 to Ohio State. What do you remember most about this week, this game? Of course, it follows the loss to Wisconsin in overtime, where it seemed like Nebraska was so close to getting over the hump. They travel to Columbus. They're still in the top 10, and they lose by 59.
I feel like, I assume everyone has the same memory of this game, and it's not a play. It's not anything. It's thinking Tommy Armstrong was incredibly seriously hurt.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, kind of like the OJ chase, they have the car bringing him back into the stadium.
Reverse OJ chase.
Yeah, they've got they're bringing him back into the stadium, and I don't know if they got a blimp, or were drones invented then? I don't know, but they had something.
They didn't have Bluetooth,
They didn't have Bluetooth, and drones were invented a few months ago, and so those weren't around, and they're driving Tommy back in, and all of a sudden, I thought Tommy was not only maybe seriously injured, I don't even remember exactly what happened on the play, but it looked bad enough in his response, and the way they took him off was it back? They took him off.
No, I'm saying and then suddenly he's
back. Yeah. No, and they took him off in a way that made me worried about that. The game didn't seem important, that he could have been that hurt, and then all of a sudden he's back, right? And walking out there, and that was enough of a relief that I think that mitigated the pain a little bit of this game.
Yeah.
And it had been a pretty good season to that point too. And so with him getting injured and all of the things, you think, all right, this is the traditional, burn the tape, don't watch the tape, move on.
Yeah.
You still got a shot here to have all your goals, right?
Actually
met at this point, which you did.
After this loss, they're still 7-2. They're still playing for a chance at a Big Ten West championship. We talked about that in a previous episode. That's why the loss, on Black Friday a few weeks later to Iowa was so frustrating, because they went into that game technically with a mathematical chance to win the Big Ten or the Big Ten West, and that it followed the performance versus Wisconsin. Obviously brutal, because throughout that 7-0 start, there'd been a lot of debate. How good are they? How bad are they? Remember, they were the punchline for the national media. And I thought they proved themselves very well in that loss to Wisconsin, a game that we'll obviously talk about, in a couple of episodes.
Yep.
And so to lose 62-3, perhaps more dispiriting than the 70-10 loss to Texas Tech. At least it's Ohio State, I guess, that this happens against, but absolute destruction there. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm with you. The Tommy Armstrong, that's what I remember more.
That's the memorable thing. Yes.
All right, is this the game that you're I cannot believe that it's this low?
Josh.
2021 Michigan, 32-29. The Michigan Wolverines come into Lincoln on, what would you say, Jack, besides Colorado in 2024, the last great atmosphere in Lincoln, Nebraska for a football game?
Now, I wasn't at this one, so I don't speak from personal experience, but watching it on TV that night, yeah. I mean, I think you put a pretty small group of games up in that group. The Colorado game last year, the Miami game, right?
Yes.
Before the Groin Kick era, just before the Groin Kick era.
Yeah, months before.
Those night games against opponents that are disdained and, have more than that. And so it looks great. It was a game, again, where you were given so much hope that this was the explosion of joy, right? That this was the moment. And it looked like it was going to be Rahmir Johnson.
Yes.
We'll always remember Rahmir Johnson for this game. He had another 3 years after this.
I know.
But this is the game you'll always remember Rahmir Johnson. I will, at least. I'll always remember Rahmir Johnson for. And again, God, for a team sometimes that you had kind of feel like they had, I don't know if lay down is the word, but just weren't able to counterpunch sometimes over the years, especially the COVID year right before that. And they counterpunched. And it was like, this is the scenario you need to actually complete one of these things, is to make that comeback late in the game and be like, okay, we can do this. And still, even after that.
This was the game, I think, so first of all, they're 3-3 going into this game. And so they had suffered the Illinois loss, they had suffered the Oklahoma loss, they had suffered the Michigan State loss. We've covered 2 of those, not one of those so far. And this is coming off of that ass whooping of Northwestern. And that game, I think, had people, I know you personally breathing, like, okay, they've lost some weird games so far this year, but they're going to be fine. And I would say, Jack, maybe more than any game in the Frost era, this was the promise of what he could be. Where the play design is great. I remember hearing from multiple people inside the stadium about the atmosphere and how incredible it is and how loud it is. And remember, this is when they first started doing the new drone show or the light show. All the
because they had just invented them. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It was really cool that they rolled it out at Memorial Stadium.
That was cool, yeah.
And that fourth quarter hits and the music and everything. And it's just like, oh my gosh, are they going to do this? And then Adrian is held up, and they don't blow a whistle, and he fumbles, and a few plays later, Michigan kicks a field goal.
Can you believe it? We wrapped up a groin kick turnover and a potential bad call.
All in one.
All into one play.
Yes.
On that one, which is insane that this one isn't in. I mean, Josh, I think I mentioned this one when you asked me at the very beginning to mention I probably mentioned maybe 5, 6 of them at the time. This is a top 5 one.
So the only thing that is going against it is that in terms of a lot of the parameters that we have set of like how good is the team is actually too good where they don't get the full max point value because we award teams that have lower SP plus rankings a little bit lower. And because it's mostly kind of an even game. And so instead of Nebraska outgaining them or Michigan destroying Nebraska in the yardage, it just drops it down just a little bit. But yeah, in terms of post-game win probability and max second half win probability, I mean, sadly, this game had the hallmarks of a game that Nebraska very much should have won.
This is a game that I would look back. Of this list, for sure, I think this is the best Nebraska played in any of the 70 games. I think probably.
Wow. Yeah,
of the losses.
We did not ever build into this project it could have meant Nebraska was back. But if we did,
that would have been a good thing. That would have been a great measure.
This game, I think, again, I don't mean to prop up 2021 Michigan, but Jack, does this game represent that maybe more than a lot of other games too? Because it's like 2016 Wisconsin, probably the best one because they're moving to 8-0 if they win that game. Right. But this game, like if you get this, you finally get a win over a ranked team, a good Michigan team that wins the conference in the process, and instead they fumble and they lose.
Yeah. No, it's got everything.
It really does.
It really does.
I imagine this game is going to be one that people disagree with the most in terms of where it.
Yeah, we'll have to tweak it for the next decade.
When we do the '90s groin kick formula and talk about 4 games, we'll have to do that. Up next, Jack, the game that inspired us to do this project, 2024 USC, and I would say this game being at 23rd. I'd say your reaction from that night has aged pretty well.
I know it actually, like in the moment, people might not know this, but sometimes in the moment, I may be a little hyperbolic, right?
Interesting.
I may say things that don't age well, sometimes in the moment.
Not cancelable things. We're not.
No. Yeah, don't age well in terms of football takes or just intensity, right? All of those things. It's in my Twitter bio, right?
It is.
Yes, unreasonable during games and immediately thereafter.
Post-game shows that night.
That's my own addendum to that. And so for those who don't know, in our I-80 Club post-game show that night, I laid out my case that this was the quintessential. It had all the elements of the groin kick era, which I had been thinking of in my mind over the last several years at this point. And it had a lot of them. And in retrospect, like, I don't know why, Josh, but for some reason, this game feels less painful out of the moment. And maybe it's because they eventually made the bowl, right?
Yeah, they win the next week.
And maybe it's because USC, I even have maybe a slightly lesser opinion of USC after the season that I did at the time.
Sure.
I'm not sure what it is exactly, but it was definitely painful in the moment.
It was. I think why you said what you did, and I think you ended up, again, being pretty right, is that when I think of the groin kick era, I think of just like really painful losses, like where they blow it late. But one of the things that you have often focused on is like a bad call that goes your way, which like the game ends on what should have been a pass interference, right? Jamal Banks' jersey is getting torn to shreds, basically.
By the way, 3 pass interference calls changes the trajectory of Nebraska football.
I think it didn't have it had multiple almost turnovers where Nebraska should take the ball away.
Right.
Of course, they don't. It has a weird, goofy play where it's deflecting off of a bunch of guys' arms. And so it's like, it has all of these things that when you watch a football game, you are very much thinking about. And so, yeah, I'm with you. Like, in a way, I kind of think this game is a little too high, but it's funny that the game gave us the project. And so being 23, I actually kind of like it overall, even if I might disagree slightly with the match.
Yeah, top half.
Yeah,
top
for
half.
sure. Next, keeping with the 2024 season, the first loss of the 2024 season, the Friday night overtime defeat to Illinois. And it's like, this game is so interesting, Jack, because I view it less as a groin kick and more of a, oh God, the season isn't going to go as well as any of us thought it was going to go, because it has the promise of the Dylan Raiola era in the first into the early part of the second half, and then just some real bad play in the back half. He misses Lindenmeyer, of course, for the touchdown. They have negative yards in overtime, and because of that, now they have negative yards in overtime cumulatively since the 2015 season, rather. This was a brutal, brutal loss. And again, it was one of those, you get a ranked win, a 4-0 start. It had like all this promise of something, and it happens, and it kind of hurts less now, I think, all these months later as we're recording, at least to me.
Yeah, I don't, there's a weird thing about that game is that was the last time I remember, and you know, there was that touchdown, I believe it was to Nayor right before halftime that Dylan made. It was just an unbelievable play.
Yeah.
And I was of the belief at halftime, I think I even tweeted something out at that time, something like, look, I don't know how the season is going to go, but Dylan Raiola is going to make sure Nebraska's in every game, is what I said.
Yeah.
Again, things that didn't maybe age all that well. And so that's kind of what I remember. And I didn't get out of that. This wasn't the game that took me out of it, right? Of course, he did miss the throw.
It lays the breadcrumbs.
To Lindenmeyer, but which, by the way, if you're picking like the most quintessential plays, just visually of this era, that one's definitely up there. But it was one of those things that's typical of a lot of these games too, where the defense just doesn't look like themselves for a period of the game.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that was the biggest surprise coming out of that one. Like, it laid the breadcrumbs for the quarterback, for Dylan Raiola, and how we were like, ooh, he's not what we thought he would be. But that was the first sign that the defense, maybe not the first sign, but the previous couple games, they had some weird leaky plays. This was the first time where you were like, uh-oh.
But against Colorado, they had just looked like, they were all world.
Yes.
At that point. You and I were talking about, is this defense elite?
We were.
Coming into this game, or shortly before that. And that's another, just going back to an overall theme, as I'm listening to these, I don't know how many games, Josh, you've been talking about, and the defense held, but the offense couldn't do anything. And the defense held in the second half, and the offense couldn't do anything. And then, right when you finally, it feels like then when you just need them, right, because the offense is humming, then you don't get it.
Yep.
Right? It's happened a bunch of times, and it's so confounding.
Yeah, it really is. The thing that I will never forget about this game, because I did the post-game show on my radio station that night, I'm walking with my co-host, John Bishop, and we're watching the game on his phone, but obviously the stadium is in front of us. And so we're hearing reactions to things. And it's like, it seems like they picked up a first down. We watch it. Sure enough, they pick up a first down. I will never forget the play that is ultimately the Lindenmeyer play. You hear the crescendo, and then it just drops. And I'm like, uh-oh. And so we pull it up. And then the next play, the missed field goal, it's an even worse sound because there's just nothing. It's just like, I was like, I think they missed the field goal. And sure enough, they miss a field goal. And so Nebraska falls to Illinois, the first loss after just an atrocious overtime period in that one. We finished, Jack, today's episode with the 2022 Georgia Southern loss. Scott Frost's final game as Nebraska's head coach. What do you think about this game being at number 21? Because if there's ever a game for me as we continue to climb closer to the top 10, this was one where a lot of people are always like, that was rock bottom for me, or that's one of the all-time losses. And I'm like, really? Like, what were you expecting by this point in the Scott Frost era?
Because it's, it's Georgia Southern, right? And it's a game. Even if things were terrible, right? Even if things were on the way to ending, I don't think anybody expected it. At least I definitely did not expect that this was what would end it. I think that's probably just sort of the embarrassing nature of it.
That it was a G5 school.
Why that it was a G5 school. That the defense just,
horrible.
Again, there you go. The offense played pretty good that game, right?
Yeah, that was probably the best offensive performance of the Casey Thompson era.
Right.
Now opponent adjusted, maybe not so much, but it was pretty good offensive performance.
Right. Yeah. But it was that. And then again, people forget it did feature a missed field goal.
This is on the last play of the game.
This is one of the most interesting questions to me is
if they make it.
What if that field goal is made?
That is a great question.
And how does that change? There's a million of those that we can do with all of these. But what if that field goal is made?
Yeah, and not so much in the traditional way of like we did the 2018 Akron game as a bonus episode for our subscribers recently, and that was more of a if they win this game, does it change the trajectory of the Scott Frost era? When you ask that question about Georgia Southern, I don't think you're saying, oh my gosh, everything's going to be fixed. It's more just like, when does Trev make the call?
Because they have got Oklahoma next.
And they got destroyed by Oklahoma the next week.
Yeah. And, maybe they would have still, I don't know, but you make it after that Oklahoma game then. I don't know.
So the one thing that pumps this game up as high as it does is because in the second half, they had about a 93% chance to win at one point in time. So it's a classic one of the graphs is really high and then it plummets down. But otherwise, it has a lot of hallmarks of being in the 40s, maybe in the upper 30s, but it climbs all the way to 21 because of how it ultimately.
It really reminds me of that 2017 Northern Illinois game is the one, and obviously Mike Riley didn't get fired right after that. Sean Eichhorst did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's kind of similar to that. So those are games 30 through 21. Jack, you have the list to your left of games 20 through 11. Pick that one up. Take a gander at it. Obviously, we will not be spoiling what's to come. Okay. I wonder what your reaction...
Whoa! Okay. Wow.
Which number are you reacting to?
Josh, 19.
19. Okay. 19.
I can't even read past that.
Really? Well, I was going to say go to a number 11. I would love to know your thoughts on that game. Being at
12?
11?
11?
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Jack, as we discussed.
13? 13, 12, 11?
Yeah.
14?
Yeah.
I guess all these are bad now, right? But still.
Jack, we're officially entering into the real groin kick eras.
The next era, ladies and gentlemen, are probably at least 4 games I probably thought were going to be in the top 10.
So we will do that on our next episode. As always, reminder, you can check out all the highlights and all sorts of stuff at huskermax.com. But we will do that on next week's episode, games 20 through 11. We are getting so close to the top 10. Looking forward, Jack, to another episode of the Groin Kick Chronicles.
I kind of am too.